Results are starting to come in from Turkey as that country is holding its election for president. Now, the race between the current president and his opponent still too close to call tonight. It could head to a runoff. But this election seen as a test of the president's two-decade rule over Turkey and his opponent's promises of democracy and inclusion. Joining us now, Jamil Jaffer, founder and executive director of the National Security Institute. Jamil, it's good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Natasha.
How free and fair is this election appearing to you so far?
Well, it's surprising because you might expect, given the control that President Erdogan has exercised over the country, that you'd see a election that was less even-handed. And yet we see here President Erdogan in pretty dangerous shape. He's below the 50% threshold he needs to be to avoid a late May runoff. His opponent is creeping up slowly but surely at 44%. President Erdogan is just around 49%. So, hard to know exactly how free and fair this election is, but it's competitive, nothing else, Natasha.
Yeah, what does this mean for Turkey if this does indeed go to a runoff?
Well, it could mean a lot because obviously Turkey, the second largest military in NATO, presented some challenges here for the NATO coalition, having bought Russian weaponry and having also opposed the Sweden's joining of NATO. And so we've seen some tension between the alliance and Turkey. And President Erdogan has been in power for now 20 years, first as prime minister, then as president. So this could be a sea change for Turkey if, in fact, the opposition pulls this out successfully or goes to a runoff and demonstrates that President Erdogan doesn't have the support that he once thought he had.
Yeah, let's switch gears to the conflict in Ukraine tonight. There are some unconfirmed reports that Russia lost 4 of its aircraft today, possibly shot down within Russian territory. Could this signal a turning point for Ukraine?
Well, it certainly demonstrates that the Ukrainians have some capability. If, in fact, it's proven that these Russian aircraft were shot down and that Ukraine or its supporters have the ability to shoot down aircraft into Russia, that could demonstrate that the Russian air power, which has largely been pretty successful over Ukraine, could be facing some serious challenges. That combined with the challenges that the Russian forces have seen on the ground and their tough fight they've had for Bakhmut, including as well as other areas, could demonstrate that the Russian effort is not as successful. And if the Ukrainians are able to mount a successful counteroffensive, as has been discussed, upcoming in the near future, that could be a really difficult challenge for the Russians to face down.
Yeah, let's talk more about that. Ukrainian President Zelensky saying that he's preparing for a new counteroffensive tactic. He's insisting this is not an outright attack on Russia. Can you explain the difference? What does this mean?
Well, he's obviously going to want to push back against Russian-controlled areas in Ukraine. There have been some amount of Ukrainian efforts to push back inside of Russia itself. As we know, the British have just announced that they're going to be providing long-range missiles, longer range than what has been provided thus far by the United States, and a place the United States has not been willing to go. Now, the British have obtained a concession for the Ukrainians that they won't fire these missiles into Russia. That being said, it does appear clear that while President Zelensky is waiting for these weapons to show up, he is going to mount a aggressive counteroffensive inside of Ukraine against Russian forces there.
Okay, Jamil Jaffer, always appreciate the time. Thank you so much for coming on the show tonight.
Thanks for having me, Natasha.
Well, thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.